In this presentation, I will relate Julian Barnes' novel The Sense of an Ending to the philosophic worldview described in Dennis Ford's book The Search for Meaning. Of course, to begin, the best course of action would be to describe to you what the philosophic worldview is. The philosophic worldview is that in which only ideals and forms exist. This means the world is not viewed through the five senses, but rather viewed through the mind and its mechanics. Because of this, the philosophic view is also very abstract. Abstractions are understood through the power of a person's knowledge. The senses are not active when understanding an abstraction. To live in this worldview, however, there are a few ruling tenets that need to be known to be in the philosophic worldview. A person's mind must be frustrated with unanswered questions, changing appearances, and general disorder. If the world presents you with a question and the answer creates many more questions or multiple answers, then the philosophic mind is not content with that answer. Ford shows us in a sentence where an individual answers the question, "What is virtue?" And then, sounding very much like a contemporary relativist, he goes on to say that every age, every condition of life, young and old, male and female, bound or free, has a different virtue, for virtue is relative to the actions and ages of each of us and all that we do. Here Ford shows the answer to the question so broad, that of what is virtue. As a person in the philosophic worldview, I would frown and scorn the man who said such a thing for complicating my life and creating discontent within my life. As you see, the question why needs to be completely answered to please the philosophic mind. In the novel The Sense of an Ending, the narrator tells the story of his past and of his present circumstances. He describes himself as a lad in school and of his three friends. These friends include a boy whom this point particularly involves. His name is Adrian Finn. As a boy wise beyond his age, he became a source of philosophic conversation in the classroom. In one of his first comments, however, he tries to begin a conversation with his teacher, but the teacher doesn't understand the way Adrian is portraying the question. When asked what happened in the time of Henry VIII's reign, he answers, "There is one line of thought according to which all you can truly say of any historical event, even the outbreak of the First World War, for example, is that something happened." Here, Adrian is trying to point at the fact that history doesn't always properly answer all the questions that we ask of it. It also can be taken into the hands of the winners or the losers and changed to better fit their wants. The historians that pass things down can also change the historical event by changing the story they pass down, whether on purpose or by accident. Adrian hopes that the teacher will take him up on that point, as he clearly is cleverly hidden in his words. He is discontent with the answers that are given from history and is asking why. This represents one of the main tenets of the philosophic worldview. Adrian is discontent with the answers given by history and decides to delve more deeply into the conversation. He does this again later in the chapter while discussing the First World War. The professor begins by asking the class, what is the responsibility of Archduke Franz Ferdinand's assassination for starting the whole thing off? The class picks sides and betrays what their opinions are for the blaming of the war. Adrian's answer instead lies with the historical fact's integrity. The question of subjective or subjective interpretation, the fact that we need to know the history of the historians in order to understand the version that is being put in front of us. Adrian is able to think beyond the senses and into the forms and ideals of history. The setting and time in which history was made is the important factor in the information reported by the historians. This remark by Adrian expresses the value of ideals in the philosophic worldview. As a final example of the philosophic worldview, I would like to point out Adrian's reaction to the question, what is history? While the other students' answers include the self-delusions of the defeated and a raw onion sandwich, Adrian says history is certainly produced at a point where the imperfections of memory meet the inadequacies of documentation. When asked to give an example, he uses the recent suicide of a fellow student as an example of a historical event. He states that they know about what happened and then asks the question, what else do we know? A single piece of documentation, a suicide note reading, "Sorry, Mom," at least according to Brown. Does that note still exist? Was it destroyed? Did Robson have any other motives or reasons beyond the obvious ones? What was his state of mind? Can we be